Today we're going to cover one of the most shocking statistics that impacts your personal finances. Tune in.
It's Brian Preston, the money guy.
Let me give you the stat.
All right, it's a shocking statistic.
It is a shocking
And
statistic.
did I hear you right that it affects all of us? It affects everyone.
Everyone. It doesn't matter if you have a checking account, don't have a checking account. It doesn't matter if you were just born last week or if you're 115 years old.
Okay.
You're ready for it. I can tell you primed.
I am primed.
100% of us will die.
Fair enough. All right. Okay. Yeah, that's true. All of us inevitably.
So look, and this is not a laughing matter. So, it's, we have to make this more. I think it's digestible. I do want us to keep this in money guy style. I want us to talk about this because here's the thing: with everybody who is above ground right now, dying at some point, we're going to have loved ones. This impacts us in two ways. We're going to have loved ones that unfortunately pass away,
right,
and then we are going to pass away.
Sure.
So wouldn't it be nice if we make sure, there's two things that I want to make sure, that we prepare a plan for ourselves.
For our financial situation.
But we also are prepared for what happens when you lose a loved one.
Sure.
I mean, because that is going to come your way. And unfortunately, many people just are not prepared for the obligations that go with that. And that's why I think if everybody will watch this show, it's going to make this transition so much easier and truthfully make it where it's more of a celebration of successes instead of getting caught up in all the negativity.
And wouldn't you agree, Brian, for a lot of folks who either watch this show via the visual media or they listen to the podcast, they're probably one of the members of their family who gets entrusted with the responsibility, but also the burden of helping navigate some of this more complicated financial stuff.
When we were asking, should we do this topic, I said, you know what? I bet the majority of people who listen to the Money Guy show are the people that are going to be asked to be an executor.
Yeah. Yep.
And that's one. So I immediately asked a few of our employees who I consider great with money, and I said, hey, let me ask you, are you the executor in any wills for your family?
Right.
Yep.
Oh, yep.
And I think Carol might have been on two.
Right. Yep.
2 or 3. So I mean, this is something that I'm telling you that it's going to impact every one of us. So let's talk about this. So here's the 3 things we are covering today: how to plan for yourself,
okay,
how to handle when a loved one passes away, and then the third thing, the whole executor thing.
Sure.
Knowing the ins and outs of being an executor. So let's jump right into this. How do you plan for yourself so that you can make this as easy on your loved ones as possible?
Because the hard thing is we never know when our last day is going to be. And so whether we are 25 years old or 75 years old, death is an inevitable thing. We just don't know when it's coming.
Unfortunately, most people are going with that whole perpetual, they're going to be here forever.
Sure.
So because you see all the stats that say people are just not prepared.
Right.
So here's what we're going to do. And here's what's cool about this. Show prep, just to let y'all see behind the curtain of how we do this.
Don't tell them.
No, this is good. We do a lot of show prep, but then Bo threw out an idea, or it was Morpheus behind the scenes. He had some suggestions. So on the fly, that's handwriting, guys. We added some show notes that is going to make this even better, and that's how to plan for yourself. Mm-hmm. And the first thing, preparation is the key thing of knowing, have you just given an inventory
Sure.
of what you have? Because you guys, when we talk about executors and the people, when you are put in charge of this for loved ones, if your loved ones are not organized, it's going to create some chaos for you. So if you want to be nice and not create that for your loved ones, let's make sure you create a net worth statement.
Yeah, I think so often when a loved one passes away, or even when we see clients who have parents or siblings or family members that pass away, there might be a filing cabinet where they saved every single piece of financial literature they received for the last 60 years. But there's no organization to it. There's nothing that tells you whether it was something that was 30 years old or 3 days old. If there was one consolidated sheet, one net worth statement that says, this is what I have, this is where it's at, and this is as of the day that I'm inventorying this, that would be tremendously helpful for your loved ones to be able to navigate.
And this, you also had a suggestion. You said, look, it's not uncommon. The older you get, the more successful you get. Your life gets more complex and you get more and more accounts. Start planning. Keep your life as simple as possible. consolidation.
Oh, that's huge. I think you even said this, Brian. It might have been an uncle or a grandpa, but his financial strategy used to be going around town to open CDs at all the different banks. Well,
it was a mess.
That's okay, and your grandfather may have very well had a beat on that, but possibly your grandmother or even your mother or father, they might not have known the 15 different banks where those CDs were. And so consolidation, or at least an inventory of where they are, might have made the transition a little bit easier.
Thank goodness for tax returns that are great ways to kind of track down where assets are for loved ones. We also talked about sentimental stuff. There's going to be quite a few things that have no market value to the rest of the world, but to you individually, they're going to be priceless.
Sure.
And how often do we see situations where when a loved one passes away, you'll have some relative that dashes in and tries to gather up all the sentimental stuff, and it kind of becomes a free-for-all. If you don't want that happening where you're creating a legacy of conflict, write a letter for all those sentimental things and what your thoughts on where you want them to go, and you will save your family so much trouble.
Yep.
The other thing I thought was just interesting was just, besides just making sure you're organized and have everything figured out, is just go ahead and just let everything be known through open communication.
Oh, that's a huge one. Yeah, you even mentioned right there, Brian. I think it's so good. Even talking about like sentimental items, we see this all the time where there might be a house, a lake house, a mountain house that's in the family. Say, you know what? I want this to stay in the family, and so I'm going to leave this equally to my 6 different kids, right? Well, your 6 different kids might not want to own 1/6 of that house, but there might be 2 kids who really want to own that. And you should have that conversation on this side of the grave so that you can make sure what you're leaving and your ultimate wishes align with the wishes of your heir so that everyone's on the same page.
So that kind of leads to, because we had this point of have the conversation early. I mean, when you start having adult children, I want you to, and this is one of those things I think, and I'm just going to go ahead and tell you, and this might upset some people. You will notice, and a lot of you who have parents who are reaching this age, you'll know what I'm talking about. There's a natural hardening of people when they reach their 80s.
Yeah.
I mean, and I'm just being honest. I mean, I've dealt with it and seen it working in financial planning for going on. I'm in my 3rd decade of doing this, and people they get when you get in your 80s, and I'm stereotyping, so bear with me, and I apologize, but there is some people, and I get it. I think there's a lot of people, there's all these scams on older people, but there's just this concern that people's coming for you, trying to rip you off. And I understand that. So I just think if you can start communications with your adult children sooner rather than later, it's going to make all this so much easier. Don't let secrets fester and then let it be a big open up, surprise, this is what you get when I pass away. That's not a successful plan. You need to start that sooner.
That's right.
And adult children, by the way, can add a lot of value. I mean, how many clients do we have that are actually super responsible, really good with money, adult children who have brought to us their parents because they just need some additional help for some of the complexity that's going on in their life. And that leads to make sure your plan speaks for you. I mean, this is a big part of it, is that when you're sick, because unfortunately, usually before we hit death, there's sometimes sickness that occurs first. You need to make sure that you have a plan. Healthcare directives will speak for you.
What are your ultimate wishes from a healthcare
Financial
perspective?
power of attorney, or having a trust document set up so that your family members can act on your behalf if you're unable to make financial decisions for yourself. Special, wills and life insurance.
Yeah.
I mean, this is big stuff. It's not, we pick on our younger listeners because you want to make sure when they have kids, but this goes beyond even when your kids are out of the house. You want to make sure that your wishes are known. Wills, life insurance, if you have anybody relying on that income, is important stuff.
And even another thing, a great thing to sort of inventory is, do you know what the beneficiary designations are on those life insurance policies or on the IRAs? Does your situation, if you were to not be here tomorrow, does the way your accounts are set up and structured accurately reflect what you ultimately want to have happen to your assets?
Yeah, I mean, because beneficiary designations, a lot of people don't realize this. It doesn't matter what your will says. Their life insurance and then your retirement accounts, anything that has those beneficiary designations, or even joint tenants with rights of survivorship accounts, they don't go by your will. They go by the survivor, what's listed as the beneficiary on those accounts. So be very careful and aware of those things. And that's actually a great transition point, Bo. When we're talking about this, of making sure your plan speaks for you is, in addition to like special arrangements and things you want at the end of life, you also want to I wanted to walk our viewers and listeners through what we've experienced we've both had loved ones unfortunately pass away.
Yep.
It's unfortunate for us, but it's fortunate for our viewers and listeners. And the fact that we also helped a number of clients through losing loved ones.
Right.
And we are the ones that have kind of been the quarterbacks that help bring it all together and walk these family members through. How do you transition this deceased person's life and help close out the estate?
Because let's face it, when you lose someone, whether it is expected or unexpected, there's a lot of stuff to deal with. There's emotional turmoil, there's relationship turmoil, there's the missing. Those burdens are hard enough to bear just in isolation. Well, then when you throw the financial implication of having to be a responsible party on behalf of your deceased loved one, it just makes things that much more complicated. So we want to equip you so that hopefully that piece can be handled so that you can focus on dealing with the actual stuff that matters, the emotional and the difficult part.
So let's kind of go through this list of what's going to happen. I'm going to go through this pretty quickly.
Yep.
And so I realize there's a lot more intricacies that could go into this, but I just want to make sure that you have a plan and know kind of what to expect if you lose a loved one. So the first thing is death certificates. Right after you pass, a loved one passes away, the first thing after you deal with the funeral home is they're going to ask you, and you'll even usually do this through the funeral home. Sometimes they will help you fill out the paperwork to order death certificates. I'm going to go ahead and tell you, this is something that's often overlooked. Don't order just one or two. Mm-hmm. Order, they get a big discount when they're batched.
Okay.
And every financial entity, every life insurance company, everybody's got a beneficiary designation, is going to probably want to raise sealed death certificates. So it's good to order a number of those based upon basically figure out how many different financial institutions you're going to be dealing with, and that's probably how many death certificates you need.
And wouldn't you argue, Brian, it's probably better to have too many than not enough. You'd rather err on the conservative side and over-order than under-order, just because you don't have to go through the process of settling out an estate, then run out of death certificates, have to go back to go get it. Just slows down the process. It slows down.
Definitely. Time is also a big part of this. And that's what, we've already talked about this on how do you plan for yourself with creating a net worth statement or an inventory. It's the same thing. If you are the person that's kind of left to clean up after a loved one passes away, you need to immediately, one of the first things I tell people to do is go create an inventory of assets, liabilities, accounts. You basically want to create a net worth statement so you have a checklist of what you need to close out, clean up, and restructure before you're done with getting rid of these assets.
So I can already hear the question now, Brian. Someone said, well, you know what? Hey, mom or dad, they never talked about money. It was taboo. They didn't bring it up. I know they had a house and I know they had cars. I know nothing else about what they have going on. Forensically, what's something I can use to even start the process?
A tax return is going to be a huge starting point. If you don't have a loved one that had a net worth statement, you'll probably want to go look at the last 2 years of tax returns. Also, pay attention to the mail for the next month, 2 months. See what's coming through. I mean, unfortunately, some of this is you becoming your own detective and piecing together what's going on with inventorying what this person had. Paying funeral expenses.
Yep.
And realize funeral homes and people who deal with those end-of-life type things are understanding that there might be a little bit of lag on getting money. So it's okay if it takes a few weeks for a life insurance policy or something. That's why it's important to get those death certificates done, because anything with a beneficiary designation like a life insurance or some of those retirement accounts, or any joint account that with rights of survivorship, you can probably process that really pretty quickly as soon as the death certificates show up.
Because all of that stuff passes outside of the will. That's not something you have to actually take to court and have it probate through the court process.
And that's going to lead to the next step, which is you got to take the will and file it with the local probate court so that they can issue letters of testamentary. And what a letter of testamentary is basically saying that the person named in this will who's going to be the executor or the person in charge of closing out this estate does have the legal authority to make those decisions. So a lot of your accounts that are going to be determined through your will, you just basically have to sit and wait until you get the letters of testamentary. That's why it's so important, guys. If you are the one that's in charge of making decisions, don't let the loved ones, all the other people who might be, because you might have a family member that's short on money,
Yeah.
and they know that, hey, this person's passed away. I know they're going to remember me, so I probably have a right to something in here. You can't distribute anything out until you get it all figured out. So be very careful of keeping things in order so that you don't get out of whack on distributing it. You got to get the letters of testamentary so you can move on to the next step. And that leads, and here's another roadblock that a lot of people don't realize. If you have loved ones that are getting pensions or Social Security, anything that's an income stream that's based upon their life, guess what? As soon as they pass away, legally, that goes away. And so if you keep getting checks or keep getting direct deposits, you're going to be on the hook. I'm just going to go ahead and tell you. And if you're the person that's in charge of distributing, you might very well be on the hook. So it's better, the sooner you can let these authorities know that, hey, you're going to have to shut off the monthly benefits. And if we need to recalibrate because maybe there's a spouse surviving, you can go ahead and start that process. But you do need to let those organizations know that, hey, I'm no longer entitled to this. And then remember, there is a $255, it's almost laughable, survivor benefit that's paid out from Social Security. So that would be, it's a one-time payment that's also out there. Don't forget filing and paying taxes.
Yeah, I think this is one that most people don't recognize and don't realize is a pretty important thing because it's not as easy as you might think that it would be.
This is one that sometimes I have to explain it multiple times to people because they don't realize that the person, the descendant that just passed away, the deceased person, they are a separate legal entity than their estate that kind of continues on after they pass away. And here's the truth of the matter. I'm just going to tell you functionality. If you pass away in the first few months of the year, it's easier.
It's a lot easier.
I know that sounds disgusting to say out loud, but I can tell you from a guy who's closed a lot of estates, when somebody passes away in November or December, you just automatically know, oh, I'm going to have to file a tax ID form for the estate because we're going to have to file. There's no way I can close this estate out within the next 2 to 3 months. So we know this is going to go into a brand new tax year. So we're going to need to get a tax ID and file a separate tax return for the estate. Because remember, remember, these are two separate taxing entities. You have the person that passed away, and then you have the estate. If there's income in the following year over $600, the IRS is going to want you to file a separate tax return. It's called a 1041, which is an estate tax return for income taxes for that estate. Now, in the year of death, you'll file the traditional 1040 for the person.
Deceased,
so that's a big difference. So that just gets you out of your income tax issue for the estate. But a lot of people, when you hear estate tax return, you're immediately probably thinking of a Form 706. That's for estates that have assets over $11 million under the new legislation. But that's a gotcha upon itself because a lot of people hear that, okay, the estate tax exemption is over $11 million now. I don't need to file a Form 706, and that might be okay on the federal side, but there's a lot of state taxing authorities that still tax estates. So make sure you understand what's going on locally and not just look at everything from the federal side because you got to make sure everybody's happy. That leads to also, you need to set up an account right after you get the letters of testamentary, after you get a tax ID set up for the estate. That's when you'll probably need to go set up a separate bank account for the estate.
It'll be in the estates, in the name of the estate,
tax ID,
right?
and it'll be in the name of the estate of, in the descendant's name. And then you'll set up that separate bank account, and that will be to pay bills. That will be to eventually distribute assets to loved ones and beneficiaries and heirs. But right now, it's just to help you keep things rocking and rolling and moving forward. You're also in charge of all the property, the real estate. Most of us pass away, and you'll have a house. You'll need to secure that house to make sure beneficiaries aren't going and taking things before they're supposed to.
You have to get
also,
appraisals.
You have to pay bills on everything. You have to pay for maintenance. And then, of course, you need to go get appraisals on all the real estate because you get a step up in basis. So it makes sense to go ahead and start gathering up all account statements for a person that's passed away, as well as get appraisals on any real property that they might have. And that's an important thing. And then after you get all that tied down, and you probably at this point, you have a good inventory and understanding of what assets are out there. You'll know the debts. You'll pay down any creditors that you have an obligation to.
Before you start distributing assets.
Exactly. You're going to work through paying off all debts, expenses, and obligations of the estate. And then you've heard me go through everything else. The last thing you'll do is then you'll distribute out to the heirs, the beneficiaries of the estate. And that kind of closes out what you'll do. I know we went through that really quickly, but these are all the things. That's why it's a great segue into the next thing, which is, what are the obligations of being an executor for an estate? Is because you just heard me go through that whole list. I just went through probably 6 months worth of work in about
4 minutes,
4.5 minutes. It's not as easy as it sounds because there's a lot of steps there. So you need to understand, if somebody asks you to be the executor of their estate, what are you getting yourself into? So I wanted to kind of give, give them kind of what is the legal definition of what an executor or executrix is doing to the estate.
When you fill out your will, when you put that document in place, you're naming, hey, this is the person who I want to make sure is going to see that all of my wishes outlined here are in fact met. They're the person responsible for legally making sure that everything named in the will is handled according to the way that the decedent wanted them to be handling. That means distributing the property, arranging for payment of debts, and making sure that taxes are paid. They're essentially the CFO of settling it all out. They're the one who legally has to do that. And what we find most often is that you would think, okay, well, if all I have to do is do what the will says, then I just follow down the list and it's done. Yeah. Usually the responsibilities of executor are a little heavier than that, and they go beyond just what is laid out in the will.
Well, if you go back through that list of all the things that are going to happen, there's a lot of things like with dealing with beneficiary designations, life insurance. Those things don't have anything to do with the will, but you being the person that was put in charge of this estate, you're probably also associated, you're probably a relative or a friend. You're going to want to be involved in that stuff. So pay attention. That's why I want to kind of talk about what's the things, the hardships or just the downsides, or just knowing, going into this thing with your eyes completely open, you need to pay attention to, and some of the things we see people, mistakes we see people make. Before I kind of go through that, one of the things I want to tell you, you're probably hearing all this and you're thinking, well, gosh, for my own estate, you need to go ahead and make sure that you have really vetted. If you want to make sure that you don't create a problem for your beneficiaries, your heirs, then give a lot of thought on who you want to be your executor.
And might I suggest also, ask them. Yeah. Make sure that they're comfortable with that, because they could say no, right? And that's not a situation you want to be in. And
you want to be the person that's so organized. This is the other thing I want to add for making sure you don't have these, that you're so organized that you tell them that it's going to be easily accessible. I'm going to show you my, when I pass away, my net worth statement will be easily accessible. My will will be in this location, and you should know where it is, because that's a big part of it. Do these things, and it's going to make it better. So if somebody asks you to be an executor, you need to say, look, are you comfortable sharing with me, maybe on an annual basis or every other year basis, a net worth statement, a tax return, and are you willing to kind of tell me where the wills are going to be? Yep. And if they're willing to do that stuff, I think it's okay, because you just want to, it sets you up for knowing what's going on in this estate. Because if they think enough of you to ask you, that means they have a lot of respect for you. You just need to make sure you go into this to do a good job, and it's set up for success.
Right. So here's some of the pitfalls that we think you ought to avoid as you go through this. And the first one you have mentioned here, Brian, we see it all the time, co-executors.
Too many cooks in the kitchen. Yep. I mean, and look, we all love our children. You love your children. But let's face it, they're not all created equal when it comes to money. Mm-hmm. Some are good with money. Some are not good with money. Some might live, it might not even have anything to do with money. Somebody might be living out of state. Yep. The other one's close by. And unfortunately, when you're dealing with executors, sometimes financial institutions will want all executors to sign off on the document. Yep. So if you got them living in multiple states all over the place, or you have 6 kids and of varying degrees of aptitude, you could be creating a complete nightmare for already a hard time, that there's going to be some butting heads of the siblings anyway. So be very careful of creating co-executors just because you don't want to make the hard decision while you're alive.
And here's the thing, it's not about playing favorites. Just because we see this all the time, like, oh, well, I named this person the executor, but that's only because I asked this person to help with this. You don't want to get into that. It's not about playing favorites. It's a job, it's a duty, it's a responsibility. You want to ask the person that you feel is the most qualified to successfully fulfill that role and carry out that responsibility.
And you don't want to create a legacy of conflict.
That's right.
I mean, that breaks your heart to know that something that was done, that maybe you could have done it a little better so your kids didn't fight after you passed away and you broke the family apart. So let's create there are situations, sometimes an executor or the person who's designing the estate document, they don't realize they're actually creating a situation that could lead to fights between the heirs and beneficiaries.
Yep.
And unfortunately, if you are the executor, you're going to be the one that has to sort through this chaos.
Right.
So let's talk about this. And I've already kind of alluded to this because I've seen this happen so many times. Is that, remember, when I went through my checklist of what happens when a loved one passes away, the last thing on that checklist was beneficiaries get to start, heirs start taking distributions or getting assets. You have to pay the bills, you have to get the expenses, you have to get the accounts set up. There's a lot of steps that have to take place. But what typically happens after a loved one passes away is everybody runs over to mama and papa's house and starts taking the sentimental stuff.
Splitting up the furniture.
It just disappears.
And the
It's gone. That is, you want to know what people are going to fight about after you're passed away. It is that sentimental stuff. So here's what the solution on that is. And if you're asked to be an executor, ask the person to do this for you. Write a letter that kind of details all the perceived sentimental stuff and what your wishes are. Yep. That equips the executor so that they can sort through this conflict, but it also will let your heirs know what your desires were so there's no surprises, and it also kind of it will defuse a horrible situation. Yep. I think that would be tremendous if you think about that. And then here's the other thing. What about, because there's going to come a point, you have cash, you've got real property, you've got other things that maybe aren't liquid. Maybe it's art. Maybe it's guns. I don't know. There's all kind of different things people own. There's going to come a point where you have to now distribute this stuff out as the executor. And somebody might want the cash. Somebody might want the real property. Yep. There's going to be a weird mix, eclectic mix of how these things get divvied out. You need to understand that as the executor, you're in charge of taking that Frankenstein mix and trying to make it as, efficient as possible without creating a lot of conflict.
Now, the good news is, as an executor, in a lot of situations, you don't have to do it on your own. While ultimately the buck stops with you, there are financial professionals out there that can help you navigate this. One that immediately comes to mind is like a CPA. You can actually talk to the decedent's accountant and say, hey, I'm trying to understand what mom or dad or Uncle Joe had going on. Can you help me walk through this? Can you help me do this? And odds are they are going to be willing to help, but just know that that's probably going to come with a cost.
Yeah, I definitely think, now look, you can delegate. Good delegation is important. Talk to the person that created the estate document, the attorney, will hopefully be able to help you through some of that probate process as well as what the desire and intention was when the will was designed. And then exactly what Bo said, the CPA who does the annual tax returns or maybe helped out with the family, they're going to have some insight for you. And then here's the the MVP of your estate plan of distributing assets is going to be if they have a good comprehensive financial planner that was kind of serving as quarterback, because a good financial planner is going to know who the CPA is, they're going to have dealt with the attorney, and they're probably going to know the intentions of the loved one that's passed away. So if you've got a great situation, look, and this is self-serving in some ways, but I will tell you, I think a lot of our clients, if you ask them, what's the reason that you're going to be with Abound Wealth and Brian and Bo for many, it's because we got you through these dark, dark times of when someone passes away, you're dealing with a lot of emotional stuff, and then you have to stack on top of that, you have to deal with all this analytical financial stuff. A good financial advisor is going to help you sort through that stuff so it's not just all going through mud and drudging through the worst part of it. You'll have a team, somebody who's doing this with you and getting you through it.
The other thing I think that's really important to mention, and one of the reasons why you might want to seek some counsel and some help for this is, as the executor, you individually can be held personally liable. So if you distribute money to heirs before paying taxes, guess who the government's going to come looking for in terms of who is responsible for settling that estate? Or if after you pay the heirs, have you double checked to make sure that all the other creditors have been paid? Because if they haven't, again, that responsibility lies on you. So you just want to make sure that you measure 2 and 3 times, bring in professionals so that you don't allow this thing that you're supposed to help a loved one ultimately negatively impact your financial situation.
This honor or this continued, you don't want to pay somebody back for a legacy of being good to you, or maybe it's a good parent. But it can turn into something bad. Now, I wanted to ask, because Bo, this is something you brought up in show prep. Should an executor take a fee, because it's allowed.
Right,
States
yeah.
allow you to take a fee as the executor. And there's all kind of different ways. You can do it by the hour. You can do it by a percentage of the assets. There's special rules. Like I know California caps how much you can take depending upon how you calculate it. So, but what are your thoughts? I mean, should you take a fee as an executor?
Yeah, I think it depends on who you are. I have some clients that I'm working with right now, or some potential clients I'm working with right now, and they're actually just a family friend. They're not a beneficiary. They don't stand to inherit anything, and it's a pretty big estate. It's pretty complicated, so it's going to take a lot of effort, a lot of energy. And I said, yeah, it seems reasonable if you're going to have to take time away from work, time away from your generating income, then yeah, maybe this estate should compensate you for that. But I would say probably in 80%, I'm making up that statistic. I have nothing to base that off of, but in 80% of the time, it probably doesn't make sense to set up yourself to receive a fee for serving as executor, because in most circumstances, executors also are beneficiaries.
Yeah, and that's a big key point. I don't know if your stat's right, but I bet it is.
I made it up, so
it's definitely
it could not be.
Many more people don't take a fee, and there's a primary reason. Guess what? When you take an executor fee, that is taxable income to you. So you have to pay income taxes if you do take a fee as being executor. And so if you're a primary beneficiary, if you know you're an heir that's going to be receiving a lot of these assets that you're working through, it doesn't make sense, since it's ultimately going to benefit you anyway, to turn a portion of it into taxable income.
It's not taxable income?
Yeah, because if
inheritance.
you heard the estate exemption is over $11 million a person, so there's a good chance it's not going to be an estate tax situation, and you get a step up in basis when someone passes away. So there truthfully shouldn't be a lot of taxes coming from this, so why would you create a taxable income event from it? So take that into account. And this is... Here's the thing, before you accept the responsibility of being the executor, here's some things we wanted to ask is, and I've kind of already alluded to this, but it's worth repeating, is make sure when this person asks you for this honor, because they think a lot of you, do you have access to all the things that are going to make you successful? That's that inventory, that net worth. That's the list. That's the will. That's that special letter of all the sentimental stuff that's out there. Because you're trying to figure out, can I do this and do it well without creating conflict, but also be very efficient in the distribution of these assets?
And then let's make it even just a little more personal. If you're someone who has a will and you've named an executor in your will, have you let that executor know, hey, I've got a net worth statement, I've got an inventory of assets, I'm going to make this job very easy on you. Thank you so much for taking this responsibility and helping serve my heirs in this way.
And then the last thing, make sure that you've given, if you're asking somebody or if you've been asked, do you have a list of all the contacts that are going to make you be successful?
Yeah.
We've already mentioned this. You need to know the attorney that drafted the will. You need to know the CPA that's helping them do their taxes every year. And then don't forget about the MVP, which is hopefully that quarterback financial advisor that's sitting on top of it all and hopefully going to be your best resource to kind of know what's going on, since this person is no longer speaking for themselves or using all their estate documents. Right. That's what's going to create success. So you heard about all the things you're hoping to get, and Bo said this already. Make sure you're equipping the people you're asking to be the executor for your estate. You're giving all those same tools to them, because this is a two-way street. We told you death is coming to us all. We all love being above ground right now, but at some point, it's 100%, we become terminal.
That's right.
And so this is going to impact you. It's going to impact you, but it's going to impact every one of your loved ones. Let's do it right. I know this is kind of an odd topic, but I know that there's going to be a lot of you. I don't know if it's going to be through search results on YouTube, or if it's just going to be you're going to recognize that you're the responsible financial person in your circle of influence. So you needed to equip yourself with this. Pay attention, and thank you for hanging in there, because I know this is not an easy topic, but thank you for paying attention. And go to moneyguy.com. We have great show notes that we always try to share with people. We also give us your email address, and we'll share when we're coming out with new shows, as well as any deliverables we create. And then when you go out to YouTube, make sure you subscribe and click the bell that lets everybody know you want to get notifications so you can stay in contact. Bo, did I miss anything else?
No, that's it. We are just so thankful for you guys. We love that you allow us to share this information. If you have a question or you have something you want to hear from us about, you can actually go out to our website, moneyguy.com, ask us a question. A lot of the times that's where the show topics come from. If you ask us something that's really intriguing and we think that, all of the audience can benefit from it. We're going to put a show together and share it. So thank you.
And I want to kind of one last thing, because a lot of you heard me talk about that MVP financial advisor. You're probably asking yourself, well, wait a minute, I don't have one of those. I don't have, at least my guy only wants to talk about investments. He never talks to me about the estate plan or what the next step is with loved ones. Guys, we work with clients all across the country. This abundance cycle is we give you this information for free with the thought that when you get to the level of success that you need that backup plan or that MVP quarterback that's going to help bring it all together, that you'll remember, hey, let's talk to Abound Wealth, and let's talk about this abundance cycle that you guys talk about by taking the relationship to the next level. So I'm Brian Preston. This is Bo Hansen. Go check it out, moneyguy.com. And we just appreciate every one of you guys and even making the abundance cycle possible.